My next guest was in near perfect health until after graduating high school. That's when she got a post-infection disease called dysautonomia, which dysregulated her autonomic nervous system and her thyroid. For 7 years, her symptoms grew worse. She was bedbound and on 17 different medications for 4 years. It was then that she began experimenting with different diets, trying each for 3 to 6 months at a time. After stumbling upon one called the GAPS diet, all of her symptoms went into remission. Understandably inspired, she went back to school for nutrition and now is a seasoned medical nutritionist who specializes in metabolic, microbiome, immune, and nervous system disorders. Now, if you think that means she's in an office all day wearing a lab coat, you would be wrong. She travels around the world researching ancestral diets and their protective mechanisms on health. Oh, and she also eats raw adrenal glands sometimes and drinks goat blood. She uses her globe-trotting research to enhance her nutritional knowledge and help clients find their own relief from things like dementia, MS, and infertility. Today, she's going to share the wealth of information of the observations she's made of communities living without illness, not even headaches or PMS cramps. Food historian, fellow Midwesterner, emanator of joy and gratitude, Mary Ruddick. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. I'm so glad to have you here. I would love to start by having you share some assumptions that you had about nutrition that got totally busted when you started your travels.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, being from the Midwest and having a mother from the South, everything was about moderation and eating the rainbow. And all that was busted, basically, because many of these tribes that I go to, they don't eat in moderation at all. They actually have quite extreme diets and they're extreme from each other. They're different from each other. And then also, I thought what I was doing growing up was very healthy, and it turned out that it wasn't. It's not about how many vegetables you eat or how many colors you eat. In fact, they're not always even necessary. So that's really blown apart, I think, any of the current recommendations in general.
Those are a lot of assumptions blown. I also have a Midwestern father and a Southern mother. So that's pretty funny. And I was mentioning in another episode we recorded, I remember my mom saying, well, I grew up eating liver and I cooked liver for you and your dad a few times. But then I learned how unhealthy it was and I stopped that. And as I was researching for our episode, I found out that organ meats are often a part of the nutrition plan, if you will, for some of the communities that you study?
Yes. Yeah, almost all of them actually. And especially for fertility. We see so many, I don't know about you, but so many of my female friends growing up have dealt with infertility, PCOS, endometriosis. And this is something that just doesn't exist in any of these tribal regions, despite their diets. And they all have very different diets for someone hoping to get pregnant who is pregnant and after birth than they do for just the normal thoroughfare. And that's something that I think we've really lost in today's eating habits.
Yeah, I would say so. I heard that many medical doctors don't have very much education in the area of nutrition, which makes people who are nutritionists such a helpful aspect of that medical team, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. And I think looking, if we take the ancestral look as well, with the nutritional bent, the food history, it's really helpful because if you all are anything like I was, I grew up, I never even had bone in my meats. So we certainly didn't eat liver. Everything was very divided from the natural world. And you could not have paid me in a challenge to eat some of the things that I have now eaten. So it's a big bridge to cross to go from the way that we've been raised to what's often needed to be perfectly healthy. And it wasn't a long transition that we had to get here. A lot of times our parents, like your mother, were actually raised on a lot of these foods My mom wasn't, but so liver's been out for a while in my family. But usually the generation before us ate quite differently than we did growing up, and our children are eating quite differently than we are now. And we're seeing an increase in these kind of dietary and health issues as well around the globe as these diets change.
And we've kind of accepted a lot of the things that ail us as just a way of the modern condition. But you have said, and I said in the intro, that you're observing these communities are free of these illnesses. So can we start by you sharing some of the observations that maybe you saw in common, maybe patterns over various communities, various continents that would be surprising to us?
Yeah, some of them you mentioned. I think the most surprising is that women don't have period cramps and that infertility doesn't exist. I think it's very easy to project our society onto tribal culture and assume that, well, of course they deal with miscarriages and infertility and childbirth deaths. But that's actually not something that happens. They genuinely just die from old age. They're very fertile, and they don't have anything. So even things that we think of as quite normal, like anxiety and depression, they can't even fathom. They don't have words for these things. They don't understand not being satisfied with life, and I think maybe that would be my answer, that it would be the incredible mood of everyone, that everyone is so uplifted in all generations, even down to the children. You don't see temper tantrums. They're just calm or happy or sleeping. One of the three. But you don't see anything else. And they're so easygoing. You know, if I went into your house and picked up children, they would start screaming. They'd be like, who is this woman? Right? But if I go into any of these tribes in my first 10 minutes, even the first minute, I can go in and pick up any child and they'll just take a nap in my arms. They're calm as a cucumber. So the feel-good chemicals are being produced at just huge, just very high amounts. And I think, you know, what I've seen with traveling the world and being with all these different tribes and these different lifestyles is that they have so much ease to them, right? They're so satisfied. They don't store food for tomorrow. They're not worried about tomorrow. They're in a very abundant state. And if nothing else, that would be my wish, to bring that abundant state back into our lives, where we feel satisfied, where we're living our purpose, where we intentionally live, right? We kind of like think about, hey, how would I like to spend the next 20 years? And then do that, right? So that we have those same feelings that these people just have naturally and aren't even working for.
Well, I would definitely work to have that sort of ongoing feeling of goodness for sure. What kind of, where are you seeing this? Like, can you give examples of countries or people groups?
Yes. Yeah. So just in this last year, I've been in 13 countries. I spent the last few years in Africa. So I was in Zimbabwe for 6 months, and then I was in Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa. I've been through the Middle East, and right now I'm down in Colombia, about to tour through Panama. There's 4 tribes in Panama that are very unique. They have not been moved from their traditional diet, so they're rare. I'm going there, and then to Brazil and on through. We'll see how many I can get through before I need to head back home. But, you know, each and every one, whether it's the Maasai tribe in Tanzania or the Batwa, the Pygmy tribe in Uganda, or the Chaga tribe in Tanzania, I think those three are very good examples because they live in the same climate. They're all equatorial. They all have access to the same plants and animals, but they all eat very differently. And yet they all have the same beautiful health, incredible health. And they all have the exact same good mood.
So it's not about subscribing to a certain eating pattern or eating diet. I don't think that's a word. You know what I mean? It's not about subscribing to a certain like ideology about, you know, your macros, but it's more about eating locally.
Yeah, my current conclusions are locally, ancestrally, and foods that came from that region. So, you know, I just spent a couple months in Mexico, and the Mexican diet is high in like pork, lard, corn, We've all seen it, right? It influences America. But the corn that we get in America is very different than the corn that you get in South America, and not in like a variety of plants or heirloom way. It's in the processing, right? So we as females, we were always the doctors of the family. And part of our doctoring was in our cooking methods. And a lot of the cooking methods have been lost. So one of the things I really see is that the cooking method is perhaps the most important aspect as opposed to the food. So for instance, you can have two people eating corn. One person is going to get healthy from that, and the other is going to get pellagra. And it all comes down to whether or not it was processed appropriately. Pellagra, for your listeners, is a vitamin deficiency that you get from eating corn, like corn on the cob and popcorn, instead of corn that has gone through a very in-depth 5-step process that they do in Mexico and in regions where corn was natural.
Wow. Okay. So what other kinds of processing have you seen that would surprise us that has contributed to these communities being healthier than us?
I guess I have my last trip on my mind, but there was a fascinating drink I had in Mexico City that is an old Aztec fermented beverage. It's an alcoholic beverage, so you can have a little fun with it. Like, actually, you have a lot of fun with it. It feels pretty good when you drink it.
I like how you were like, actually,
It was
confession.
a lot of fun. Yes.
Well, actually,
Yeah,
sidebar, that's what I love about your social media account is when I looked at it, I was like, how is this lady like a nutritionist lady? Because you look like you're having so much fun. And when I think about accessing the healthiest foods and having the most knowledge, especially as an American, not having the advantage of having ancestors, whispering over my shoulder, telling me about the ancient ways of doing things. I think a lot of Americans feel that way. I feel so lost, like, oh my gosh, this is so much work. I'm going to have to look all this stuff up and research it and make sure the sources are credible. And then there's you, and you're like having so much fun with it, and you just make it look like something you want to join in. And I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Yes, I believe life to be fun and abundant. I mean, what else are we here for, right? But to enjoy it and to enjoy right now. So yes, none of it has to be a headache. And I know that feeling. I remember entering into this world, going from thinking that I ate healthfully, right? I was an athlete growing up in Ohio, so I thought I knew it. I didn't. And then, crying in the grocery store because I was like, what can I eat here? There's nothing I can eat. It can feel overwhelming, but you can also go about it like a game, and it can be really, really fun. So, I mean, for me, I realize I don't live the normal life. And part of that is because I did go through that major illness for 12 years. And, a huge lesson, I got so many lessons out of that. I mean, I will never be able to say thank you enough for going through that because of all the goodness that came. But one of them was that I lived very intentionally. I feel like I've always wanted to take a hot air balloon over the Mexican pyramids. Let's do it. And so then I go, and so I can't complain. And in the meantime, I get to study all these amazing traditional diets and meet these incredible people who live so differently than us, really breaking mental paradigms. And one of the things that I learned in my illness is that at least for me, I was very much stuck in a birdcage of thinking. And when I was able to open that door, I could enjoy my life despite the illness. And I think that's the case for any of us, right? Your listeners may not be going through a deadly illness or a painful illness, but I bet they're going through something equally awful. And there's a way that you can open up a door where you can still have a good life despite that thing that's going on. There's this woman, Elise Sumner, who was from Prague, and she's passed away now. But when she was at 108, she did this wonderful video with Tony Robbins. And she had lived through horrific things, the Holocaust, her husband, her family was killed. And she had this way of seeing everything as a gift. And so even when she was in the concentration camp, she was happy and laughing with her child. It wasn't afterwards that she developed that appreciation. She had it going through it. And I think that's what these tribes members have. They have this resilience and this ability to see the good in the moment, and not in a trite way, not in like a okay, I know I have shelter and I have food and I love my mom, and therefore I should feel very happy. And I'm kind of angry at myself because I know I have it pretty good. Why don't I feel more happy? Like now I'm angry that I'm not grateful enough, right? Not in that way at all, but in a very genuine, like, this is good. I'm in this camp and I'm with my son, and how lucky I am that I'm with my son, kind of thing. And that was the lesson that I got while I was in the illness. I wasn't as good as Elise, and that it didn't come naturally. It was something I had to cultivate. But these tribes members have that naturally, right? And so I think a good take home for your listeners is that there is this door, and we are in these mental traps, and we don't even know that we're in these mental traps. But there's this door to where we can have the most fabulous life, even if we're dying from an illness. And so once I healed, taking that mindset into the real world where I'm healthy, I feel like a kid in a candy land, right? I mean, the Pulque, this drink of the Aztecs, is to die for, and you just feel like giggling for hours after you drink it. It's very good. It gives you a buzz, obviously, but it also, I mean, ladies at home, I highly recommend it in place of wine. It's it's more of an uplifter, but it's also an immune regulator. So you're getting even more, so while you're cooking dinner, instead of drinking wine, get some Pulque. Pulque is a fermented agave beverage. It's made from the sap of the agave. And the agave really gave the Aztecs life. It was a product in many, many ways. We won't go into all of them. I would bore you all to tears. But what they would do is ferment this sap for about 14 days. The sap is stretchy, and it has something called a polysaccharide, which is a long-chain sugar. And these things are often found in traditional diets, and these regulate the immune system. So while you're drinking this and your mood is getting bubbly, and you're suddenly going from a Karen type to like a easygoing, happy person, you're also regulating your immune system. So you're protecting yourself from this pandemic we're dealing with, and also all the colds and things that the kids are bringing home from school. So anyway, you learn a lot of fun beverages, and and if anything, I would recommend looking into having some Pulque.
Okay, well, I am adding that to my list of things to track down. When you learn all these things from different communities, different continents, different countries, is this primarily where you're getting information to help your clients, or is it more so from your schooling? How do you put all of your travels to practical use when it comes to giving advice?
I'll be honest, I don't use the travels too much for practical advice, nor my schooling. I got most of that from all the research I did while I was sick, and then from working with tens of thousands of people. You learn so much from working with people as to what works and what doesn't. More of the purpose of my travel has been for people to see with their own eyes what real health looks like and how we can have it. Because I found that when I went into practice, people didn't believe that they could heal from their condition. They always said, well, but I've been diagnosed with this thing and it's not curable. And my doctor says it's not curable. And as far as I've seen, as long as you're not born with it, like Tay-Sachs, you've got a really good chance. You just may not know what to do, right? And the doctors rarely have the tools for these kind of things. They have tools for surgeries. They have wonderful tools. But for the chronic things that we're dealing with, the tools aren't there. But if we can reverse and live like the ancients or like the currents, a lot of times we can get out of it. And what I hope I'm doing, and maybe this is my Ohio nature coming out, my moderate Midwestern coming out, but I've never liked the dietary wars going on and all the dietary dogma that happens. And I think, if we look at this with any kind of intelligence, it's very obvious we can be healthy on very many different diets. Historically, people ate very different diets and were in perfect health. What's new are all the chronic illnesses. And so what I'm hoping to map out with all of my research is to show that there are certain diets that you can go to for reversing illness. And then there's many diets you can use once you're healthy to stay healthy.
So are you documenting every culture's dietary habits and putting it into some sort of research paper or book?
Yes. So film. So I've been
Oh,
filming for
film.
years. Yes. Yeah, film. And then I'm writing two books. And I probably should take 6 months off to finish them, but I'm writing two books. And then I just started a research study as well to look at autonomic neuropathy and reversing them.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, I've heard it's a nutritional study.
Uh-huh. That's correct.
I heard those are really challenging because of all of the um, different
Factors.
factors that can play in, and because of having to track people for long periods of time. How are
Mhm.
you, and it can be expensive, how are you funding that?
Sure. I honestly fund all my own research because my goal is for no one to go through what I went through. I really don't think anyone needs to be sick with anything. And if all the moms and all the dads knew what I knew, then we could be a very different society. We could be very healthy. And the only thing we'd have to worry about then are car accidents and things like that, hitting the diving board. That would be a nicer world. So I self-fund all of this, honestly. Now, what you said is absolutely true. Dietary studies need to be taken with a huge grain of salt, probably a mountain of salt. A planet of salt because because a study by definition you can only change one thing to see an outcome, and with diet you're looking at many things and you don't actually know what's causing the outcome, if people are compliant, all these kinds of things. So in general, the dietary studies that have been done in the past are not studies at all. They're observations, and those don't tell you very much. They're more of a hypothesis, and those have gotten us into far more trouble than helped. They have given us all the bad advice that has left us with a very sick population. There are a few things you can study. You can study taking out a certain toxin, like a lectin, and we won't go too nitty gritty because this will bore your crowd. You can study ketosis because it's a blood measure. So if you put someone on a ketogenic diet, it could be done in a healthy or an unhealthy way, like the traditional old school studies from 1910 done on epileptic children were done with vegetable oil and sea salt crackers. I mean, they weren't healthy foods that they were giving the kids. They still worked for reversing the seizures, but they weren't healthy. But you can do a ketogenic study because it's something that you can test with the blood, never the urine, but the blood. So we're doing ketogenic, and then we're working on cellular membrane health with a specific fatty acid. And I've seen it in my practice over and over. And I spoke about it at a conference, how neuropathy reverses. And so one of the doctors opted to spearhead it for me. And so we're self-funding it, but it's going to be short because usually neuropathy is 6 to 12 months at most. So it'll just be a 1-year study to look at this. And he's done other studies on neuropathy, but never on neurological neuropathy, which is a bit different.
Interesting. Wow. I can't wait to see your film and your book. So to be continued. So for the listeners and the viewers who they want to take some next steps into becoming more, having a more robust health, what
Yes.
are some things that you would advise to take those next steps in?
I would simplify things. We have this idea to eat the rainbow, and it's actually not right. We want to eat more simple. It's more about what you don't eat than what you do. So if you kind of just think about what you have available to you at this time of year, if you were a hunter-gatherer, wherever you are, that'll give you a good idea. So if you're in Louisiana, it's going to be some crawfish, seafood, maybe some wild greens, right? And in the summer, you're going to have more fruit. So you can go about it that way. But, you know, what turned around the books for me was not following dietary books. It was looking into dietary history and anthropology. And I think one of the best people to learn from there is Bill Schindler. Bill Schindler is a doctor of anthropology who studies traditional diets around the world. You can learn a lot from him. He's very fascinating. But I would keep it simple. Think 1940s. Have some meat or a fish and a vegetable for dinner. Have some eggs for breakfast. You know, simplify rather than overcomplicate. We don't need all these superfoods. They're not really superfoods. They're not.
Oh gosh, you're blowing our minds here, Mary.
Yes.
So much information. Okay, so much that we thought we knew that maybe isn't true. You mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, when we were chatting off mic, something about sunlight in your gut. Was that?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So since Americans started learning about the microbiome, which is the part of our body that's bacteria, it's about 60 to 90% of our body is bacteria. We've had a lot of misinformation. People seem to think it's only in the gut. It's not. It's everywhere. It covers our face when we're looking at each other. We're looking at the microbiome. But it's very affected not just by diet, but also by lifestyle. And one of the things that affects it the most is whether or not it gets daylight. So it's very important to get out in the sun, or at least outside if you're in a cloudy region, before 10 a.m. for at least half an hour. And you want to get light on your skin and in your eyes. That light in your eyes boosts your serotonin, your dopamine, all of the things that we need to live a graceful, happy life. But more than that, it shifts your microbiome by 50%. That's as much as diet can do. So that one act will make a huge difference.
50%?
50%.
So wait, so if someone just started going outside for every day for 30 minutes prior to 10 a.m.
Yes,
without sunglasses,
that's right.
and they have some kind of microbiome tummy issue, but then their friend does the same thing and they've got a different issue. Are you telling me that the sunlight will help to begin to regulate both issues separately?
Yes, yes. So when I work with clients, I work from the outside in. We work with the sunlight to activate the hormones, move the microbiome from the skin down, and then also lifestyle things. You know, there are a lot of things that affect us that no one realizes. Like if someone carries your groceries for you, your estrogen boosts. If you hug a puppy, your oxytocin goes through the roof. That's your anti-stress chemical, right? So there are a lot of lifestyle things that affect our body far more than our diet. And so if you go at it from both aspects, if you're working on reversing a condition, or even if you're just trying to cultivate some joy because you haven't felt happy in a long time, you can get there without spending any extra time.
Interesting. And if somebody, as we wrap up, if somebody wants to engage with some of your programs or just some of your content, how can they do that? What's the easiest way?
Probably the best way is my website, enableyourhealing.com. One day I'll be an Instagram influencer, but right now I just post the fun. So you can find me on Instagram. It's maryruddick.com or Mary Ruddick CNC. And then I have a small YouTube channel, but that's also where I have all my podcasts. So you can find my other content if you want to get into the nitty gritty and the nerdy. That's really good. If you've just been feeling in the dumps, I'd encourage you to join the Back to Joy program that I run. Or if you're having fertility issues, I run a hormonal group. But all of that can be found through my website. And then finally, if you want an easy food choice, you can always get Captain Soup, which is a great food company that I help make the recipes for.
I did subscribe to the Captain Soup YouTube channel because I saw that you were one of the educators on there. And I love the short videos that educate you in just small tidbits.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a fan of saving people's time.
Well, that's always a good thing. Thank you so much for this chat and sharing your enthusiasm and joy. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. I hope to see you next week too. I talk with the most interesting people that you've probably never heard of. Most of them are paradoxical and bring an opportunity for you to grow as a person. So if you like bright, meaningful entertainment, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.